studio lights burned white and merciless, pouring down from the rafters like artificial suns. The applause sign blinked in urgent red pulses, and the crowd obeyed, rising into a roar that felt less like enthusiasm and more like weather. Donald Trump stood center stage, chin tilted upward, hands loosely folded in front of him, absorbing the noise as if it were oxygen. He wore his usual navy suit, the tie blazing red against it like a flare. His hair, that carefully sculpted golden crest, held its position against the conditioned air. Across from him, seated behind a sleek glass desk, was Desi Lydic, her expression poised between amusement and calculation. She had the calm of someone who knew the script, and also knew when she might choose to ignore it. The cameras glided silently on their tracks. Producers whispered into headsets. Somewhere in the control room, a director counted down with quiet urgency that IT was supposed to be a routine interview. The promotional banners had promised fireworks, but in television, fireworks were manufactured by design. The tension was prepackaged, the jokes rehearsed. Trump had done this dance before. Late-night hosts, smirks, pointed questions, his counterpunches delivered with theatrical bravado. He thrived on friction. He turned it into spectacle. Desi leaned forward slightly, her pen resting against her cue cards. "Mr. Trump?" she began, her voice smooth and bright. "You've said many times that the media loves to distort your image." He smiled. "They do. They absolutely do. It's unbelievable. But tonight," she continued, a faint glint in her eyes, "I thought we might look at something undistorted." The audience hummed, sensing a shift. Trump's smile tightened, though it didn't falter. On the massive screen behind them, an image flickered to life. Not a scandalous photograph, not a secret recording, but a montage of clips spanning decades. Trump at ribbon cuttings, Trump at rallies, Trump on reality television, Trump stepping off planes. The footage moved quickly, almost rhythmically, showing the evolution of a public persona shaped for cameras. Desi stood and walked toward the screen. "You see," she said, gesturing to the collage of moments, "we all know you as the brand, the builder, the deal-maker, the showman. But what fascinates me is how carefully crafted it all is." Trump rose from his chair too, as if refusing to be visually minimized. "I'm very authentic," he declared. "People know that." "Authentic," she echoed lightly. "Yes, but authenticity can be curated." The montage shifted again, now highlighting subtle repetitions, the same phrases delivered years apart, the same gestures, the same tilt of the head. The audience laughed softly as patterns became obvious. That Trump's eyes narrowed, though his posture remained confident. "Consistency," he corrected. "That's leadership." Desi turned back to him. "Or performance." The word hung in the air, fragile and sharp. The studio lights seemed to intensify. A hush rolled across the crowd. Trump lifted a hand, ready with a rebuttal, but Desi pressed on. "Here's the bombshell," she said, smiling faintly. "Not about politics, not about policy, about theater." Another clip appeared, behind-the-scenes footage from years ago, Trump adjusting his jacket before stepping onto a stage, rehearsing a line under his breath. The crowd gasped, not because it revealed wrongdoing, but because it revealed preparation. Desi faced him squarely. "You've always known exactly how to command a room. The pauses, the repetition, the escalation. It's masterful, but it's also scripted." Trump chuckled. "Everybody prepares." "Yes," she agreed, "but you turned preparation into mythology. You sold the idea that everything was instinct, that every line was spontaneous genius." The audience murmured again, intrigued. It wasn't scandal in the traditional sense. It was something subtler. A challenge to the legend. As Trump shook his head, a faint draft drifted across the stage. No one noticed at first. The air conditioning had been temperamental all evening. A technician backstage frowned at a monitor. Desi stepped closer, lowering her voice slightly. "You built a brand not just on success, but on spectacle. You understood something before most politicians did. That attention is currency." "Of course it is," Trump replied. and I'm very good at earning it. Exactly, she said. But here's what people don't see. The long rehearsals, the camera angle negotiations, the lighting adjustments, the fact that nothing, almost nothing, is accidental. The draft strengthened, swirling near the stage. Trump lifted his chin, preparing a grand retort, when a sudden, mischievous gust swept downward from above. It was brief but forceful. There was a collective intake of breath. For a split second, time fractured. Trump's iconic sweep of hair lifted. Not dramatically, not flying across the room, but enough to shift unnaturally. It rose, separated, and then, to the stunned disbelief of everyone watching, a carefully fitted hairpiece loosened at the edge. It did not soar like a bird. It did not tumble theatrically. It simply shifted enough to reveal its artifice. The audience gasped again, louder now, the sound ricocheting off the studio walls. Cameras zoomed instinctively. In the control room, someone swore under their breath. Trump's hand shot upward with astonishing speed, pressing the piece back into place with a decisive motion. His face remained composed, but a flash of raw irritation flickered through his eyes. Desi stood frozen for half a second. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. Not cruelly, but in sheer disbelief at the absurdity of the moment. "Well," she said softly, turning back to the camera. "I suppose that's the most literal reveal of the night." The audience erupted. Some in laughter, some in shock, all in awareness that something unscripted had occurred. Trump lowered his hand slowly. His jaw tightened. Then, astonishingly, he smiled. "It's called good hair," he declared. "Very strong hair. Survived worse than a little breeze." The crowd roared again, this time more freely. The tension cracked like glass under pressure. But Desi wasn't finished. She stepped closer once more. "That," she said gently, "is exactly my point." He arched an eyebrow. "No matter what happens," she continued, "you turn it into a moment, a line, a performance. Even when the illusion slips, you make the slip part of the show." For the first time that evening, Trump hesitated, not visibly to most, but enough for the cameras to catch the faint pause. The applause sign blinked again, urging the crowd to react. Yet now their response felt organic, less mechanical. Desi returned to her desk. "The bombshell isn't that you prepare," she said. "It's that you've convinced millions that the performance is reality." The lights seemed hotter now. The air felt thinner. Trump walked back to his chair slowly, adjusting his tie. "People like strength," he replied. "They like confidence. I give them that. And maybe," Desi said, her voice softer, "they like humanity too." The studio fell into an almost reverent silence. The moment lingered long after the applause faded. Social media exploded before the segment had even ended. Clips of the gust, the shift, the laugh spreading like wildfire. In the control room, producers debated whether to cut to commercial early, but the director held steady. Live television had a pulse tonight. Trump leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. The earlier flash of irritation had vanished, replaced by something more calculating. "You know," he began, "people have been obsessed with my hair for decades. Decades. It's incredible. Nobody talks about their own hair, just mine." Laughter rippled through the audience. Desi nodded. "Because it's iconic." "Exactly," he said, seizing the word. "Iconic." She tilted her head. "But icons are symbols, and symbols are designed." He studied her for a moment, as if deciding whether to spar or concede. "Everything important is designed," he said finally. "Buildings, brands, campaigns, television shows. And personas?" she asked. He smiled again, but this time it was smaller, more restrained. "Especially personas." The admission was subtle but unmistakable. The audience reacted with a murmur that felt almost respectful. Desi clasped her hands together. "So maybe tonight's breeze was helpful." "Oh," he challenged. "It reminded everyone that behind the icon is a person adjusting to the wind like the rest of us." The metaphor hung in the air. For a heartbeat, Trump seemed to consider pushing back with bluster. Instead, he surprised the room. "You think people don't know that?" he asked. "They know. They just don't want to see it all the time." The statement shifted the atmosphere again. It wasn't defensive. It was reflective. "You're saying," Desi replied carefully, "that they prefer the armor. They prefer strength," he corrected. "Or what they think is strength." The studio felt quieter than any live broadcast had a right to be. Desi glanced toward the camera, aware that millions were watching. "But strength can include vulnerability." Trump gave a short laugh. "On television? Yes," she said simply. He looked out at the crowd. Faces illuminated by stage light, eyes fixed on him. The performance had changed shape. It was no longer a duel. It was something closer to negotiation. "I've built a life on winning," he said slowly, "on projecting success. If you show cracks, people assume you're finished." "Or," Desi countered, "they assume you're real." Silence again. Not awkward, charged. The earlier gust of wind felt symbolic now. A mischievous interruption that forced an unscripted truth into the room. The hairpiece incident, already looping online, had stripped away a layer of mythology in seconds. Yet here he was, still seated, still commanding attention. Trump straightened. "Let me tell you something," he said, voice firm. "You can't lead if you're worried about every gust of wind. And you can't connect," she replied, "if you pretend the wind doesn't exist." The exchange felt less like satire and more like philosophy. That I in the control room. The countdown clock blinked. 30 seconds to commercial. Desi leaned back, studying him. "So what happens when the illusion slips?" she asked quietly. He met her gaze without flinching. "You adjust it," he said, "and keep going." The director signaled for wrap-up. Desi turned to the camera. "Well, tonight we've seen adjustment in real time." The audience laughed warmly. Trump rose from his chair before the applause cue could even flash. He stepped toward Desi, extending his hand. She stood as well, shaking it firmly. "Great show," he said. "Unpredictable," she replied. He glanced upward briefly, as if daring the air to challenge him again. The lights shimmered. The studio held its breath. Nothing happened. The applause sign blinked one final time, but the crowd didn't need it. They were already on their feet as the cameras pulled back, capturing the full sweep of the stage. Trump lifted a hand in a familiar wave. His hair sat firmly in place once more, the icon restored. Yet something subtle had shifted, not just on his head, but in the narrative. Backstage, aides buzzed with urgent energy, strategizing how to frame the viral moment. Online, supporters and critics alike dissected every second. Was it humiliation? Was it triumph? Was it proof of artifice or proof of resilience? On stage, Trump paused before exiting, turning once more toward the audience. For a fleeting instant, the showman's smile softened into something less rehearsed. The wind had come and gone. The lights would dim. The clip would replay endlessly. But the image that lingered wasn't the slip itself. It was the recovery, the reflexive hand, the quick joke, the decision to stay seated instead of storming off. Desi watched him disappear behind the curtain, then exhaled slowly. Live television had offered what it rarely did anymore. A moment no one could script. The studio began to empty, the echo of applause fading into the rafters. Technicians adjusted lights. Crew members rolled cables. The stage returned to ordinary wood and metal. Outside, the night air moved freely, indifferent to spectacle, and somewhere in that vast, invisible current, the idea remained. Icons may be designed, personas carefully constructed, but even the most polished image must eventually face the wind. When it does, what matters isn't whether it shifts, it's whether it stays standing.